All right, we are bringing our focus now on an issue with which India hopes to, one, counter Pakistan and two, China. India has signed a deal with Iran to manage the Chabahar port for the next decade. It's being seen as India's big counter to Pakistan's Karachi as well as Gwadar port and to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative and its influence. Yet, it isn't about trade with India, Iran alone. Let's dive straight and look at where the Chabahar port is and why is this strategically important. India has been developing the port in Chabahar on Iran's southeastern coast along the Gulf of Oman as a way to transport goods to Iran, Afghanistan and Central Asian countries. Look at this. This is the Gwadar port. This is the Gulf of Oman. You have India's Kandla port. You will have Pakistan, where you have the Gwadar port as well as the Karachi port. Remember, Pakistan has not given permit to India to be able to trade with Afghanistan and other central countries which are essentially landlocked. So bypassing the port of Karachi and Gwadar is one of the benefits that India is going to be looking at. This area is landlocked and Pakistan has not allowed India land access for trade and particularly with Afghanistan and Central Asia. In fact, blocking this route multiple times for India's trade with Afghanistan and other landlocked countries. Pakistan has several times tried to impede it, tried to block it. India wants the port to be a key hub in the international north-south corridor that connects India with Russia via Iran. India with Russia via Iran. It's a 7,200-kilometer multi-mode transport project for moving freight among India, Iran, Afghanistan, these being major countries. Apart from that, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia and Europe. And remember, for a long while, this remained dormant. Now, to give you a sense of how important this is, according to Reuters, an Iranian minister has told them that a total of 2.5 million tons of wheat and 2,000 tons of pulses have been shipped from India to Afghanistan through Chabahar port already. The first such batch was released in 2017. By 2019, the United States exempted Chabahar port from its sanctions on Iran, recognizing its pivotal role in facilitating Afghanistan's reconstruction efforts. Despite challenges posed by US sanctions over Iran's nuclear program and the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, India remained steadfast in its commitment to Chabahar's development, emphasizing its importance for regional connectivity and in trade. In 2022, India announced intentions to secure a long-term arrangement with Iran for Chabahar's management. That has now come through. Now let's look at another map. That is going to give you a sense, ladies and gentlemen, of how big this deal is for India. Look at this. China's string of pearls. Look at this, ladies and gentlemen. All these red dots that you can see are crucial ports. In fact, we haven't taken this part of Sudan for that matter. Are crucial ports that are manned, managed, operated, partnered, some form of China's intervention in these ports. A string of pearls around India. Gives you a sense of what has been a strategic threat from China. Nodes of influence, as they have called, from naval ports to trade ports. Developments in ports surrounding India, such as Gwadar, as I showed you, Gwadar, Hambantota, and Sitwe on the Bay of Bengal, coast of Myanmar for that matter. You have Cambodia, Chittagong in Bangladesh. Now to what is India's commitment to Chabahar port? The long-term deal has been signed between Indian Ports Global Limited and the Port and Maritime Organization of Iran. Under the agreement, IPGL will invest about $120 million, while there will be an additional $250 million in financing, bringing the contract's value to $370 million, according to the Iranian minister. IPGL first took over operations of the port in the end of 2018, according to Reuters, and has since handled container traffic of more than 90,000 20-foot equivalent, or TEUs as it's better called, including several other million tons of bulk and general cargo. But if one needs to sum up the big likely impact of one of the geopolitical diversifications reducing dependency on traditional routes, access to Afghanistan, Central Asian countries, opening of investments, markets, Iran holds significant reserves of oil and natural gas, making it a crucial partner for India's energy security. Chabahar provides India with a strategic foothold in Iran's energy-rich region, counterbalancing China.
Today, India and Iran have reached a historic milestone in their long-standing relationship, driven by the visionary ideals of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, championed by India's Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi. Under Modi's leadership, the momentous agreement that began on 23rd of May 2016 is culminating today in a long-term contract, symbolizing the enduring trust and deepening partnership between India and Iran.
All right, let's try and get a sense at this time of what this really means for India. I'm being joined by Ashok Sajjanhar, who's a former ambassador, Pathikrit Payne, who's the geopolitical analyst, as well as Burzine Waghmar, who's a Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, London. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us. It's a privilege to have you all. Let me just come across to you, Ashok Sajjanhar, first. What do you make out of what India seems to be doing at this point to be at least claiming that it will be a big counter to Pakistan and China's growing influence, whether it be in the Indian Ocean region or for trade, particularly via Gwadar or Karachi ports?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sneha, for having me on your show. Couple of points here. You know, as the minister himself said, it is a game changer. And basically, it is because our relations with Central Asian countries, 5 Central Asian countries and Afghanistan, they are time-tested, they are historical, they are civilizational. But we have really not been able to exploit them. We have not been able to take full advantage of these relations, of these historical relations, because, as you mentioned in your introductory comments, we have been denied access to these countries through Pakistan, the land access, which would be the easiest, which would be the quickest, which would be the most convenient, which would be the most competitive. But Pakistan does not allow us this access, so we have to skirt around it. You know, just to give you an example, even when we wanted to send 50,000 tons of wheat as a humanitarian action to Afghanistan, still Pakistan had lots of problems in providing us with the access through its territory. So we are skirting around Pakistan, and the best way to do it is go through Chabahar. So it is basically, one is in terms of reaching these countries, because these are, you know, our historically we have been very close. Then geopolitically and strategically, it is very significant, because particularly after the Russia-Ukraine conflict, China has been expanding its footprint in this region in a very big way. And India needs to be present there. India needs to show its flag and make the, take the most advantage out of our ancient relationship. So through Chabahar, we can access the Central Asian countries. And of course, there are the Caucasus. You mentioned Azerbaijan, you mentioned Armenia. You mentioned, you know, we can go to Europe also from there. And also, final point here, even getting access to Russia, because Russia has been denied access through Europe going westwards. So it is also keen to use the international north-south transport corridor, of which Chabahar is a very important element. So for all these reasons, it's not only trade, it's not only Central Asia. The whole the significance of this is much greater. It is geopolitical, it is strategic, it is economic. Sneha.
That's hugely important. Burzine Waghmar, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I couldn't speak to you before the show started for the right pronunciation, but thank you so much for joining us. How do you look at what's unfolding right now?
Yes, Sneha, I should like to say this. It is very important for India, but let's look at it as from a multilateral diplomatic lens, because the ambassador touched upon certain points which are imperative to note. The 50,000 tons of metric wheat due to Pakistan's intransigence had to be brought down to 20,000 tons, which did eventually reach Afghanistan thanks to India aiding Afghanistan as part of the UN World Food Program. So India was a contributor to that, which is what I need to point out. And also that a person to which it must also be noted that this deal has come on the heels of immense difficulties that Indo-Iranian traders faced after the JCPOA agreement of 2015, which of course is now off course, as you know, since President Trump pulled out of it. And India was under considerable pressure from the Commerce Department in DC not to undertake trade with Iran. But the deal has come through, and it was important after following Prime Minister Modi's May 2016 official visit to Tehran. And also, please remember, in November 2018, India did offer something to Tehran to the effect of a tax break. That is to say, the Indian Finance Ministry, when it inked a deal with the National Iranian Oil Company, it waived a 637 million tax break, which is normally levied on corporations doing business in India. And for cash strapped and fund strapped Iran, it means a lot, as you can imagine, in these times, reeling under sanctions and the rest of it. So India has played more than its part in order to in a manner of speaking, woo Iran. And it must also be noted that Iran tends to leverage this in its relations both with India and Pakistan in order to maximize outcomes for itself. That needs to be pointed out. And may I say this? We have to see if Chabahar is also brought into the North-South corridor. Because, Sneha, the original North-South corridor, when mooted in 2000, was Bombay, Bandar Abbas, Baku, Astrakhan, St. Petersburg. And Bandar Abbas is a port just to the west of the Straits of Hormuz, which is a very critical artery for the world's oil supplies, as you know. And two dry freight runs have been done from Vashi, Nhava Sheva, Bombay, to Bandar Abbas and onwards. But nothing much has come of it due to a variety of reasons, not least, of course, Russia is mired in the Ukraine war. And Armenia and Azerbaijan are, of course, blowing each other to pieces in a border war for a considerable period of time. Iran, due to the sanctions, and Armenia has not even laid the rail lines down yet. So that is going to take some time. But for now, of course, India has got, I can put it, a feather in its cap with Chabahar, because that opens up the road to Herat, West Afghanistan, and through Nimruz and Farah provinces to reach Kabul, and wheat, and not just wheat, but please remember, India has been supplying under the UN World Food Program surgical gloves, paracetamols, chloroquine tablets for malaria, and wheat, and also 20,000 tons of pulses, which have reached Afghan homes and hearts to date.
Right. Important points, Pathikrit Payne. And if we can have at this point the map on our screen of the string of pearls, if we can have particularly that, because I want to go to Pathikrit Payne particularly on this aspect. And as Burzine Waghmar spoke particularly about India's commitment, whether it be about the soft power, about committing to essentials, medical essentials, to food essentials, to war-torn Afghanistan. And if you look at how Chabahar is exempt of sanctions by the US to Iran. But look at what we are showing on the screen, the string of pearls, or in simple words, the growing influence of China in the Indian Ocean region in and around India. Pathikrit, is this Chabahar an important counter to this? Is it even an equivalent when we look at it?
Well, Sneha, of course, Chabahar is very important strategically in terms of connecting with Central Asia, as has been stated earlier. Also, to keep an eye on the Gwadar port and whatever is happening across the China-Pakistan economic corridor. If you look at, and as you rightly mentioned about the string of pearls, India does have a counter strategy in place. India has a port of call agreement, maritime agreement with many countries in the Southeast Asia. There are countries of like Philippines or Vietnam with which there are strategic, cooperation increasing. There are arms deals happening. There are, strategic bases India has come up with in Seychelles or Mauritius. So things are happening. This game will continue for a long period of time. But I think Chabahar is also very critical from the perspective of the fact that we do import a significant amount of, petroleum, fertilizers, and edible oil from Russia, which comes via North Sea, Mediterranean Sea, and through the Gulf of Aden, which is increasingly becoming very volatile for various reasons. And so I think Chabahar is very critical strategically from the part of perspective of not just the INSTC or keeping an eye on Gwadar, but definitely yes, it does give an some kind of a leeway to India in terms of keeping an eye on the whole of Chinese activities in the whole region. I am not saying that tomorrow the Indians will dock up their naval ships over there, but it does give a some kind of an eye to keep an eye on what they are doing. See, let me tell you one thing. There is a strong cooperation going on between Iran and China. There is a $400 billion 25-year cooperation agreement they have. So I think we have to keep that separate. We will dehyphenate that from what India is trying to do in terms of the Chabahar port. The primary objective, invariably, number one, is to ensure that Iran is made parts of something as critical as INSTC. Because let me tell you one thing, one of the key reasons of whatever is happening in the Middle East is because Iran was not included in the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor for the sanctions reasons. And I think because of the sanctions on Iran, there is a thought that if Iran cannot do prosper in the whole region, they'll not simply allow others to prosper. They'll create problems. So for India, in terms of doing the balancing act of having an INSTC, getting it connected with Chabahar is very important. Russia will play a very critical role in it. But I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is that it is not primarily China-centric. When it comes to the military aspect of it, I think there's a larger naval maritime game India has in place. And of course, there is that part has been taken care of in various ways. We can discuss another time. But Chabahar has a very, very critical role in terms of connecting with Central Asia and to ensure that once the
Pathikrit,
cooperation
isn't it
increases.
interesting that this also possibly is a way to really balance out between US and Russia as well? It's again India not going either ways. It's taking both together.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, one of the key reasons I believe of all the problems that you have in Middle East is number one, the obsession that certain sections of Iran has that they want to destroy Israel, and at the same time, the obsession that the Americans have to impose sanctions on one of the largest producers of oil in the world. Now, if you have that kind of sanctions on Iran, which cannot trade the oil, then it would simply not allow anyone else to do it. That is exactly what is happening in Middle East today. So you need to, if you want to reduce tension in the whole of Middle East, you need to ensure that Iran is given an equitable stake in the whole growth paradigm matrix, and in which I think India is playing a very critical role while having good relation with Israel and the Arab world. India is ensuring that Iran does not feel let down or cast away. So I think making Iran a critical part and Chabahar a critical part of INSTC, first of all, will trickle down or reduce the tensions to a certain extent, and it would also somewhere hedge their overgrowing dependence on China right now for all kind of investment in the petroleum sector or manufacturing or infrastructure, because nobody else wants to do it because of the American sanctions and the fear of it. So I think it's a balancing act that India is doing.
Ashok Sajjanhar, it's interesting because if you look at this work that began with this port, it was almost 2 decades ago. In 2024, the entire geopolitical space, the role that India is playing, the role that key blocs and allies are playing, has dramatically changed amid 2 to 3 real-time wars that the world is witnessing in an unprecedented manner. That's just 2 to 3 real-time wars. There are threats of wars looming large all over. With something like this, even if you talk about Iran, say, as a energy hub, and if you look at the possibility of trade going in through, say, to bypass the Gwadar and the Karachi port, sustainably, India may say this was a big foresight. It could not have predicted what the world has come to in 2 decades, yet it was going that trajectory. But what else do you look at what India really needs to be focusing on now to be able to counter the key geopolitical challenges right now that are emerging globally?
Yeah, is that a question to me, Sneha?
Yes, Mr. Ashok Sajjanhar.
Yeah, okay. No, you're very right. I think Iran has been made into a pariah state, and that is why it has gone into the embrace of China in such a big way. I think it is a classic example of the manner in which Russia has also been pushed into the arms of China because of all the sanctions that were put after 2014, then after 2022, etc. And this is something that is not in our interest. Even as far as Iran is concerned, India has had very long civilizational, historical relations with it. We used to import about 10% of our oil requirements. About more than $12 billion of our oil used to come from Iran. But after Mr. Trump moved out of JCPOA in 2018, we have stopped importing any oil from Iran. And that is not a very sustainable equation with Iran as it stands. So I think it is also not only, Chabahar is not only reaching out to Afghanistan. Chabahar is not only reaching out to Central Asia, not only to Russia, but I think with Iran also to build our strategic partnership, to build our strategic ties. I think it is very important because we do not want that Iran should go completely again into the arms of China, as China has been trying. We know that China has had some sort of it has made some headway by resolving the relations between the very difficult, fractious relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So we also want to have, as far as our strategic ties are concerned, with Iran and, of course, with the region of Central Asia, as I mentioned earlier, I think we want to maintain our ties. So going into Chabahar, investing there, I think we'll be able to get more investments because once countries and companies realize that India is invested there for the long term, for 10 years, it's a 10-year long agreement, I think there'll be much greater willingness on the parts of many other companies and countries to come there and to engage with Iran. And I think with some of the countries, not China, but some of the other countries, we need to get Iran also engaged. We need to get Iran also involved. So it is both bilateral India-Iran relations as also more on the regional and strategic level. Sneha.
Right. Very quickly, so I think we are getting a breaking news at this point. I do have to ask Burzine Waghmar one last question, but let me just tell our viewers at this point, we're getting information that ex-Bihar Deputy Chief Minister Sushil Modi is no more. A big information that's coming in at this point. Ex-Bihar Deputy Chief Minister Sushil Modi is no more. That's the information that we are getting at this point. A big information that's really coming in. He was almost 72 years old. I'm being joined by Sanjay Jaiswal at this point. Sir, what can you tell us? This is extremely sad news that's coming in at this point.
Yes, the whole BJP is very saddened. He has guided us since 1990 to till now. And the kind of knowledge he was having, the kind of analytical capacity he was having, nobody can match him. It's a personal sorrow for me also because we have been very close to each other. My father was very close to him. We have worked together for more than 40 years. That's very unfortunate, and I'm
Right.
speechless.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, can you confirm this to us, the reason behind his death?
Well, he was having carcinoma, and it was the metastasis happened. The liver and lungs all were involved. That was the reason. In cancer, how much you try, you are not sure what kind of recovery you will get. And it was unfortunate that we couldn't check it, and it was spread in the whole body, and that's why we lost him.
Right, this is absolutely extremely sad news coming in at this point. Former Bihar Deputy Chief Minister Sushil Modi no more at this point. All right, returning back to the issue that we were discussing at this point. Thank you so much to our panelists for staying on with us. Burzine Waghmar, to you, my last question at this point, Mr. Burzine. With what's unfolding, how important is this being seen for countries that do not want to possibly buckle to what would be the traditional modes of trade or traditional modes of allying possibly with what would have been the traditional forms of allies?
Well, India and Iran both pursue strategic autonomy. It's not just India as such. And Iranian foreign policy since 1979 has been predicated on, maximizing its limited outcomes through strategic autonomy. And India is one of the few countries on which Iran can and indeed has been able to bank upon. And Washington has, given India a green signal, as has been pointed out, on certain aspects, like the trade deal. As we speak, Sneha, the Vostro bank account trade deal for Iran to purchase oil through rupees is in operation through UCO Bank, Calcutta. That was implemented from 2016 onwards, and it is still on board, which is now patterned also with the Indo-Russian Gazprom deal after the Ukraine war. So that continues, and also bypassing traditional antagonisms, as you put it, so to speak. Iran is able to purchase goods and materials against Indian imports of oil in rupees. Now, the rupee is not traded internationally speaking true. So Iran is constrained to plow those rupee proceeds back into India for investments in Indian companies and for Indian purchases of goods and perishables and the like. But what I want to say in conclusion is this, is I look forward to something now occurring again to sweeten the Indo-Iranian trade deal, Sneha, namely the Farzad B gas oil deal, which was inked in 2008 between National Iranian Oil Company, ONGC Videsh, Oil India, and IOC. India in 2002 invested in discovering that field, which holds up to 1.1 billion cubic feet of natural gas. But then, due to a variety of reasons and talks being forestalled, the deal did not come to ONGC Videsh, and local Persian petroleum company Petropas was awarded the contract. And so India was left bereft. It is now to be seen if Tehran has a change of heart and reoffers it to India. That's something I'll be watching in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those insights, Ashok Sajjanhar. Thank you very much for joining us. Pathikrit Payne, thank you very much for joining us. And Burzine Waghmar, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, all three of you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.